Welcome back, Fan-Fueled family. On today's episode of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club, we're going to look at Surfeit of Thieves. It's got a pretty great twist at the end, and I don't want to spoil it in this intro, so let's get right into it. This looks interesting, said Indic, his eyes narrowing to observe the black caravan making its way to the spires of the secluded castle. A gaudy alien coat of arms marked each carriage, the lacquer glistening in the light of the moons. Who do you suppose they are? They're obviously well off, smiled his partner Heriah. Perhaps some new imperial cult dedicated to the acquisition of wealth? Go into town and find out what you can about the castle, said Indic. I'll see if I can learn anything about who these strangers are. We'll meet on this hill tomorrow night. Heriah had two great skills, picking locks and picking information. By dusk of the following day, she had returned to the hill. Indic joined her an hour later. The place is called Ald Olria, she explained. It dates back to the Second Era when a collection of nobles built it to protect themselves during one of the epidemics. They didn't want any of the diseased masses to get into their midst and spread the plague, so they built up quite a sophisticated security system for the time. Of course, it's mostly fallen into ruin, but I have a good idea about what kind of locks and traps might still be operational. What did you find out? I wasn't nearly so successful, frowned Indic. No one seemed to have any idea about the group, even that they were here. I was about to give up, but at the charter house I met a monk who said that his masters were a hermetic group called the Order of St. Iadnua. I talked to him for some time, this fellow named of Parathion, and it seems they're having some sort of ritual feast tonight. Are they wealthy? Asked Heriah impatiently. Embarrassingly so, according to the fellow, but they're only at the castle for tonight. I have my picks on me, winked Heriah. Opportunity has smiled on us. She drew a diagram of the castle in the dirt. The main hall and the kitchen were near the front gate, and the stables and secured armory were in the back. The thieves had a system that never failed. Heriah would find a way into the castle and collect as much loot as possible while Indic provided the distraction. He waited until his partner had scaled the wall before rapping on the gate. Perhaps this time he would be a bard or a lost adventurer. The details were most fun to improvise. Heriah heard Indic talking to the woman who came to the gate, but she was too far away to hear the words exchanged. He was evidently successful. A moment later she heard the door shut. The man had charm, she would give him that. Only a few of the traps and locks to the armory had been set. Undoubtedly, many of the keys had been lost in time. Whatever servants had been in charge of securing the Order's treasures had brought a few new locks to affix. It took extra time to maneuver the intricate hasps and bolts of the new traps before proceeding to the old but still working systems, but Heriah found her heart beating with anticipation. Whatever lay beyond the door, she thought, must be of sufficient value to merit such protection. When at last the door swung quietly open, the thief found her avaricious dreams paled to reality. A mountain of golden treasure, ancient relics glimmering with untapped magicka, weapons of matchless quality, gemstones the size of her fist, row after row of strange potions, and stacks of valuable documents and scrolls. She was so enthralled by the sight, she did not hear the man behind her approach. "You must be Lady Trest," said the voice, and she jumped. It was a monk in a black, hooded robe, intricately woven with silver and gold threads. For a moment, she could not speak. This was the sort of encounter that Indic loved, but she could think to do nothing but nod her head with what she hoped looked like certainty. "I'm afraid I'm a little lost," she stammered. "I can see that," the man laughed. "That's the armory. I'll show you the way to the dining hall. We were afraid you weren't going to arrive. The feast is nearly over." Heriah followed the monk across the courtyard to the double doors leading to the dining hall. A robe identical to the one he was wearing hung on a hook outside, and he handed it to her with a knowing smile. She slipped it on. She mimicked him as she lowered the hood over her head and entered the hall. Torches illuminated the figures within around the large table. Each wore the uniform black robe that covered all features, and from the look of things, the feast was over. Empty plates, platters, and glasses filled every inch of the wood with only the faintest spots and dribbles of the food remaining. It was a breaking of a fast, it seemed. For a moment, Heriah stopped to think about poor lost Lady Trest who had missed her opportunity for gluttony. The only unusual item on the table was its centerpiece, a huge golden hourglass which was on its last minute's worth of sand. Though each person looked alike, some were sleeping, some were chatting merrily to one another, and one was playing a lute. Indic's lute, she noticed, and then noticed Indic's ring on the man's finger. Heriah was suddenly grateful for the anonymity of the hood. Perhaps Indic would not realize that it was she, and that she had blundered. "Trest," said the young man to the assembled, who turned as one to her and burst into applause. The conscious members of the order arose to kiss her hand and introduce themselves. Nerdla, Sulik, Kyler. The names got stranger. Tanya, Tillitz, Neuterop. She could not help laughing. "I understand, it's all backwards. Your real names are Aldrin, Celius, Relic, Poinot, Stillith, Parathion." "Of course," said the young man. "Won't you have a seat?" "Say," giggled Heriah, getting into the spirit of the mask and taking an empty chair. I suppose that when the hourglass runs out, the backwards names go back to normal? That's correct, Trest, said the woman next to her. It's just one of our order's little amusements. This castle seemed like the appropriately ironic venue for our feast, devised as it was to shun the plague victims who were, in their way, a walking dead. Hariah felt herself lightheaded from the odor of the torches and bumped into the sleeping man next to her. He fell face forward onto the table. Poor Surfeit, said a neighboring man, helping to prop the body up. He's given us so much. Hariah stumbled to her feet and began walking uncertainly for the front gate. Where are you going, Trest? Asked one of the figures, his voice taking on an unpleasant, mocking quality. My name isn't Trest, she mumbled, gripping Indic's arm. I'm sorry, partner, we need to go. The last crumb of sand fell in the hourglass as the man pulled back his hood. It was not Indic. It was not even human, but a stretched grotesquerie of a man with hungry eyes and a wide mouth filled with tusk-like fangs. Hariah fell back into the chair of the figure they called Surfeit. His hood fell open, revealing the pallid, bloodless face of Indic. As she began to scream, they fell on her. In her last living moment, Hariah finally spelled Trest backwards. Okay, before we get into the discussion, let's talk key terms. The Imperial Cult is a group of loosely associated organizations based out of the Imperial's home province of Cyrodiil. Each branch of the cult worships a different god in the group of deities known as the Nine Divines. Akatosh, the god of time. Dibella, goddess of beauty. Arkay, the god of the cycle of life and death. Zenithar, god of work and commerce. Mara, goddess of fertility and compassion. Stendar, god of strength, mercy, and charity. Kinnereth, goddess of rain and the winds. Julianos, god of wisdom and logic. And Talos, the king of earth and sky. Each god has multiple smaller cults that worship different aspects of them, so it's not unheard of for there to be two or more completely unrelated cults worshiping the same deity, just in different ways. The Second Era is a time period in the Elder Scrolls. It ended roughly 430 years before the events of Morrowind and 550 years before the events of Skyrim. The Order of St. Iadnua is Onde spelled backwards. The Onde clan is one of the three major vampire clans of Morrowind. Their dark power is one of the mind and of magic. Vampires in the Elder Scrolls fall under a wide range. Some, like the Volkihar clan of Skyrim, are directly given their vampirism by the progenitor of the vampires himself, Molag Bal. Others, like the clans in Morrowind, are closer to the undead interpretation of vampires in pop culture. There's a book in Oblivion and Skyrim that presents a rather interesting and fun account of different kinds of vampires, and if there's interest, I can cover it. So, of course, the gimmick here is that the names are backwards. St. Iadnua is Onde backwards, the name the group gave Indic, Surfeit is first course backwards, and Trest is dessert backwards. When the hourglass ran out for her, the name they gave her changed from Trest to dessert, and she was devoured. The first lesson here is to not judge based on appearances. Hariah and Indic see a gaudy coat of arms that they don't recognize. They immediately assume it's just some branch of the Imperial cult focusing on wealth and deem it a valid mark for stealing. Even when Indic can't find any independent information on the group, they take the word of one of the group's subordinates as to what it is, and they walk right into a trap. The second lesson is that greed can be a powerfully motivating force, but one that will often lead you to ruin. Of course, greed is usually inherent to the very concept of thieves, barring certain outliers like Robin Hood. Close, try again. Still not quite there. No, definitely not that one. There we go. I prefer this Robin Hood for obvious reasons. Ooh-da-lolly. When you get greedy, you can get sloppy, careless, you can lose sight of everything but your end goal. That's ultimately what leads to the thieves' downfall here. They get so enamored with the idea of a castle full of treasure that they don't stop to consider, wait a minute, could this be a trap? The final lesson is to have your wits about you. The moment Hariah figured out that the names were reversed, she should have realized that the name they gave her is dessert backwards, and she should have done everything in her power at that moment to get the f*** out of there. I don't think she would have been able to escape at that point. It was already too late. She was already surrounded by hungry vampires, but it's still an important message. Surfeit of Thieves can be found in 3 guaranteed places in Morrowind. First is Fat Leg's Drop-Off, a small tavern in La Ode. There's another copy in Minabi, a bandit cave east of Vivec and south of Telicero. And the final copy is in Odebal, a small bandit cave north-northwest of Aldrune. It's a skill book, so when you read it for the first time, you'll get a permanent 1-point bonus to your security skill, which dictates your success picking locks and disarming traps. The book can also be found in Oblivion and in Skyrim. So that's Surfeit of Thieves. It's another great story with an important message. What do you think of the book? Have you ever found it in-game? Did I miss any important lessons the book is trying to teach? Let me know down in the comments. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Just Spencer36, my first ever subscriber who I know loves horror. Hopefully you got a kick out of this one. Next time, we're going to take a look at the book you voted for in the last poll, The Gold Ribbon of Merit, a fun story about 2 friends practicing marksmanship. Thank you so much for watching. This is a fun series, so I hope you enjoy it too. If you want to support the channel and me as a creator, the best way you can do that right now is simply by clicking the like button, leaving a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribing. I know you hear it all the time on YouTube, but it does really help out. If you want to check out the whole Elder Scrolls Reading Club playlist, click here. Or click here for a video on the Iron Knights, sentient crystals piloting droids in Star Wars. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.